Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Two Bald Nerds. My name is Richard Chapman. This is Mike Myers. Mike, we're going to pick your brain a little bit today. We're going to talk about RAID configurations. Definitely not talking about RAID the bug spray, right?
All right. Yes, RAID.
RAID. Okay, so just in case we have anybody joining us today that doesn't know what a RAID configuration is, can you give like a brief 30-second, what is RAID?
Sure. RAID stands for Redundant Array of Independent Disks. Who cares what it stands for? What it is RAID is a way of making two or more physical disks act like one or more physical disks. That's really what it boils down to. I can take two physical hard drives and make it look like one drive to the operating system. And we do RAID for two reasons. Number one, we want to speed things up. And number two, we want data redundancy. So if you don't need either one of these two things, there's no reason to do RAID.
Okay, and this obviously this is not something that individual users are generally doing on most of their normal home computers. This is probably more a server.
I would be careful about that.
Okay.
Today, better, above average motherboards all have RAID support built into them, where you can just take 2 or 3 or 4 or 7 hard drives and create RAID arrays. I would say most advanced users or people who have data that they really don't want to lose will tend to use RAID even at home. I use RAID at home. But it is very much a server data farm type of thing. So the thing you got to remember with RAID is that we have these different levels. So we have RAID 0, RAID 1. There's something called RAID 2, 3, and 4. I'm going to ignore those. And then we have RAID 5, 6, 10, and 0, 1. And basically all these are different ways. Like, for example, RAID 0 means you take 2 hard drives. So when you save a Microsoft Word document, that Word document is broken up into little chunks, right? I mean, that it has to be put down in individual, let's just call it sectors on the hard drive. Or with RAID, we usually tend to call it stripes. So what'll happen is when you save that Word document with RAID 0, and for the record, Richard, you can't look at these drives and go, oh, that's configured as RAID 0. Most of the time, there's some configuration system you got to go through. So you can't just look at them. Anyway, so with RAID 0, we take 2 drives, and that Word document, we save one piece to this drive, then one piece to that drive, one piece. And what we're doing there is we're speeding things up. So RAID 0 allows you to go fast.
That sounds great, but what happens if one of those drives fails now? Half my Word document is gone.
That's right. And not only is it like the front half or the back half, it's every other piece. So it's completely gone. So I always make the joke about RAID 0. Everybody's done RAID 0 until they lost something. So if you're into safety, then they have things like RAID 1, which is, again, 2 drives. But in this case, it makes a complete copy of each stripe as it copies. So with RAID 1, it's slower because you have to write everything twice and read everything twice. But it has a high degree of redundancy. So then we start getting into variations thereof. Like for a long time, we had this thing called RAID 5. And with RAID 5, you had to have a minimum of 3 drives. And so 2 of the drives stored the data, and the third one had what was like a parity information. So if I said to you, Richard, x plus 1 equals 2, solve for x, can you solve for x?
Yeah.
Right. So it's kind of like how parity works, is that it's based on the other 2 pieces of data. So if you lose either the parity or one of the other 2 stripes, they can rebuild themselves automatically. That's RAID 5. Problem with RAID 5 is that if you lost 1 drive, you're okay. But if you lost 2 drives, you were gone. So that's like where RAID 6 came in, which is pretty popular today. RAID 6 allows you to have 2 parities for every write. And then that way you could lose up to you can lose up to 2 drives. The downside to RAID 6 is it takes a lot of disks to make RAID 6 go. So you end up with quite a few. Then they have other variations like RAID 0 plus 1 and RAID 10, which is like stripes of mirrors and mirrors of stripes. I don't want to get into any of those. There's nothing wrong with them, but so we have all these RAID configurations. So in order to do RAID, either you're buying a nice controller, okay, and you plug all your hard drives into this controller, and then when you boot up, you usually have some kind of configuration to create the RAID arrays and get that all set up. Then you have software RAID, so like storage spaces in Windows. where you can just take any old drives, plug them anywhere. And these are almost always SATA drives that are rotational. It's not super common to use SSDs for RAID right now. Not to say that can't change in the future.
I was going to say that would almost make sense to be able to use SSDs for RAIDs, would it not? I mean, what's the issue?
Well, it's that the speed benefit really isn't there. And and again, a lot of this stuff, Richard, is etiquettes, not laws of physics. You know what I mean? Like, for example, right now, the red hot thing is your SSDs are where you put your operating system and your executables.
Because it's faster. It's quick. It's a lot faster than working on a normal disk.
And if I lose any of that, I can restore from backup trivially. All right.
Yeah.
So the thing that this usually when people are asking me about RAID, I go, do you have any data on your server that if you lose it, will you cry? And if they say yes, then I'll tend to look at RAID solutions. Right now, if you're in a Windows environment, storage spaces is an amazing, almost too easy to use software. It's proprietary, but that's still okay. There's lots of hardware versions where you can buy a special card, and Adaptec's still out there, folks like that. But the only reason you're going to be doing RAID is, number one, you want speed. Number two, you want security of your data.
Okay.
RAID is not a backup. RAID, if you lose data in a RAID array, hopefully you have got a smart controller that, you know, sends you a phone call or puts a message on your SMS saying, hey, drive number 4 just died. Now we're using the other drives to work around it, but you, Mike Myers, might want to head over to that file server, pull out the bad drive, shove a new one in, and go. So we don't think of RAID as a backup. RAID is redundancy, but not a backup.
That's interesting. You know, it's funny. I actually don't think I ever thought of it that way. I think I've always thought of RAID as being a form of a backup to a certain degree, specifically especially when you're talking about mirroring. But now that you say it that way, it's almost more focused on availability, being able to have the data, the information available faster without having to, you know, go through crazy hoops if you were to lose a drive.
Yeah, and the other things to keep in mind is, like, for example, RAID arrays don't live happily, in my opinion, as bootable drives. It certainly can do it, not a problem. All operating systems can work as bootable arrays, but it takes a little tweaking. And again, it's just not what we're doing right now. You know,
Right.
So, like, for example, the two things that I got to keep on my SSD, my operating system and my executables, I can restore that from installation media, right?
Right.
I can't lose that amazing Two Bald Nerds video that we shot last week if it's stored on one drive and that dies. But no, RAID is very much out there, but don't think of RAID as a backup. Think of it as redundancy, but not really a backup. A backup's going to be a separate storage, hopefully far away, stuff like that.
Okay. All right. So for those individuals maybe who are maybe found this video looking for RAID so they understand it better, who are getting into the industry, IT, security, things like that. Security Plus, obviously, it's something that you do need to understand as well too. So for Security Plus exam, for instance, what do you need to know about RAID? Like what are the main things there that you would look at?
Well, make sure you know the different RAID levels: RAID 0, 1, 5, 6, 10, and 0+1. Or
Ignore
0.
2, 3, and 4, right?
Yeah, nobody ever really used them. I think in my entire life, I've actually seen one real world RAID level 3 device ever built. Make sure you understand the concept of a RAID array. You may have 5 hard drives on your computer, but it's the RAID array configuration where you go, I want this drive, and this drive to be part of the RAID array. The other drives that you don't select will just be part of the regular boot order, just like any old regular drives.
Okay.
Keep in mind that it's overwhelmingly most common to see RAID on rotational media, although we're starting to see it on SSDs, but that's more of a price thing than anything else, Richard. It's certainly not a law of physics thing. But that's about it.
Okay, awesome. Well, Mike, thanks as always for your expertise and knowledge and so many things, IT, networking, and security. For those of you that found this video looking for RAID configurations, hopefully that helps you out a little bit. Stay tuned for our next episode. We'll see you guys soon.
If you like Two Bald Nerds, check out our entire playlist right here. It's a lot of fun. We'll see you there.